The judge will believe me. My husband leaned toward me and whispered those 6 words with a smile that made my blood run cold. After 36 years of marriage, Daniel looked more certain than he ever had on our wedding day. Every document on the judge's bench seemed to prove I was confused, unstable, even incapable of remembering my own finances. I thought I had already lost everything: my marriage, my children, my dignity. Then, just as the judge began to speak, the courtroom doors swung open. Someone rushed inside, breathless, clutching a worn brown envelope. And Daniel's smile vanished. If this opening already has you wondering what was inside that envelope, I'd love for you to tap. Like it really lets me know stories like this are worth sharing. And if you've ever seen someone twist the truth to look like the victim, tell me about it in the comments. Most of all, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. And if heartfelt family dramas are your kind of stories, I hope you'll subscribe and join me for the rest of this journey. People always say you never really know what goes on behind someone else's front door. Looking back now, I understand how true that is. My name is Linda Harper. I'm 61 years old, and until 2 years ago, I believed I had built a life most women dreamed about. Daniel and I had been married for 36 years. We lived in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, where everyone knew everyone else. Our house wasn't extravagant, but it was comfortable. We had a large maple tree in the front yard that Daniel planted the year our daughter Emily was born. Every autumn, our grandchildren loved jumping into the piles of golden leaves. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Daniel worked as a financial advisor. I spent most of my career as an elementary school librarian before retiring at 58. We raised 2 wonderful children, Emily and Ryan. They grew into responsible adults, started families of their own, and visited often enough that our home still felt full of laughter. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. For years, neighbors admired Daniel. "You're so lucky," my friends would tell me. "Daniel is such a gentleman. He still opens your car door after all these years." I always smiled. Because he did. He opened every door when people were watching. He complimented me during church dinners. He brought flowers on anniversaries. He never forgot my birthday. To everyone else, he was thoughtful, patient, generous. I believed that too. At least in the beginning. The first warning signs were so small that I barely noticed them. When I wanted to visit my sister in Kentucky, Daniel would say, "Why drive all that way? She should come here." If I planned lunch with old co-workers, he'd sigh and say, "I was hoping we'd spend the day together." If I insisted on going anyway, he'd never argue. Instead, he'd become quiet. Painfully quiet. He had a way of making silence feel heavier than shouting. Eventually, I stopped making plans. It seemed easier. I told myself that's what marriage was: compromise. Only years later did I realize I was always the one compromising. Daniel never stopped seeing his friends, never canceled his golf weekends, never missed business conferences. But somehow my world became smaller every year. I didn't even notice it happening. One day, I looked around and realized almost every important relationship in my life somehow went through Daniel first. He answered the phone before I could. He told family members whether I was available. He reminded me which birthdays to call. He handled all the finances. He paid every bill. Whenever I asked about our investments, he'd smile. "I've got it covered, honey." That sentence became part of our marriage. I've got it covered. Need taxes done? I've got it covered. Need insurance? I've got it covered. Need retirement planning? I've got it covered. It sounded loving, responsible, protective. I never questioned it because I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, the father of my children. the man I'd spent more than half my life with. When my mother passed away, Daniel organized everything. When our son graduated college, Daniel handled the expenses. When we bought our retirement home, Daniel completed every document. I simply signed where he pointed. I thought that's what partners did. Looking back now, I remember one conversation that should have changed everything. It happened about 8 years before the courtroom. We were sitting on the back porch watching the sunset. I asked him, "Do you think we're ready for retirement?" He smiled. "Better than ready." "Can I see our retirement account sometime?" His smile didn't disappear. It simply became thinner. "You worry too much. I'd just like to understand." "You trust me, don't you?" That question ended the conversation. Of course I trusted him. I felt guilty for asking. Now I understand something. People who deserve your trust rarely ask you to prove it. As the years passed, Daniel slowly became the storyteller of our marriage. Whenever friends asked how we were doing, he answered first. If someone asked about my health, he responded before I opened my mouth. "Linda gets tired more easily these days." Linda forgets little things. Linda has always been absent-minded. Everyone laughed, including me, because they sounded harmless. Little jokes. Except they weren't jokes. They were seeds. Tiny ideas planted in other people's minds. I never realized he was creating a version of me that others would eventually believe. At family dinners, if I forgot someone's birthday, Daniel would chuckle. "See? I told you she can't remember anything?" Everyone laughed. When I misplaced my reading glasses, he'd grin. "That's Linda." Again, laughter. I laughed too, because that's what wives do. We laugh with our husbands, even when we're the joke. Then there was church. Every Sunday, Daniel greeted everyone by name. He volunteered for charity events. He helped elderly neighbors with yard work. People adored him. Our pastor once called him a model husband. I remember feeling proud. Now those words make my stomach turn. Because Daniel understood something I didn't. Reputation can become evidence. If enough people believe you're kind, they struggle to imagine you being cruel. If enough people believe your wife is forgetful, they'll accept almost anything that follows. I didn't see the trap. I only saw a dependable husband. Then about 3 years before the trial, retirement changed everything. We suddenly spent every day together. No work schedules, no separate routines, no distractions. That's when I started noticing things I'd ignored for decades. Phone calls that ended the moment I entered the room. Bank envelopes disappearing before I opened them. Daniel insisting on checking the mailbox first. Whenever I asked simple questions, he answered them with another question. "Why are you worried? What made you think about that? Are you feeling okay today?" At first, I thought he was simply concerned about me. Then I noticed something else. He never actually answered. He redirected. Every conversation somehow ended with me apologizing. "I'm sorry. I probably misunderstood. I'm overthinking." Those became my favorite sentences. Not because they were true, because they kept the peace. I thought avoiding arguments meant protecting our marriage. I had no idea I was protecting his secrets instead. The woman sitting in that courtroom months later wasn't weak because of one terrible day. She was exhausted after decades of tiny battles she never realized she was fighting. Every quiet sacrifice, every unanswered question, every moment of self-doubt. They had slowly shaped me into someone who questioned herself before questioning the man beside her. And that was exactly the wife Daniel wanted. Because a woman who doubts herself is much easier to deceive than one who trusts her own instincts. I didn't know it yet, but everything I believed about my marriage was about to collapse. All it would take was one ordinary afternoon. and one envelope I was never supposed to see. The envelope that changed my life looked completely ordinary. It arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Daniel had gone to play golf with 2 friends. I remembered because he had kissed my forehead before leaving and said, "Don't wait up for dinner. The guys want to grab steaks afterward." Nothing about that morning felt unusual. I spent the afternoon reading on the back porch until I heard the mail truck. Like always, I walked toward the mailbox. Like always, I expected it to be empty because Daniel usually checked it first. But that day, for the first time in years, I reached it before he did. Inside was a thick envelope from the investment company that handled our retirement accounts. Normally, I would have placed it on the kitchen counter without opening it. That had been our routine for decades, but something made me hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the small voice inside me that had been growing louder ever since retirement. I opened it. The first page made no sense. The account balance was nearly $400,000 lower than I expected. I blinked. Then I checked the account number. It was ours. My heart started beating faster. I turned the page. There were several large transfers. Some had happened 6 months earlier, others nearly 2 years ago. None of them looked familiar. The money hadn't gone toward taxes. It hadn't gone toward medical bills. It had been transferred into accounts I had never seen before. I whispered to myself, "There has to be a mistake." I read every page twice, then 3 times. The numbers stayed the same. When Daniel came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the papers spread in front of me. He walked in smiling. "Smells quiet in here." I didn't smile back. He immediately noticed the envelope. His expression changed for only a second. Then it returned to normal. "What's all this?" "I opened today's mail." He nodded calmly. "Okay. I don't understand these transfers." He glanced down. "Oh." Just one word. "Oh." No panic, no surprise, no confusion. He picked up the statements and casually flipped through them. "I forgot to tell you." Forgot. Nearly $400,000 had disappeared, and he had simply forgotten. "What are these accounts?" "They're investment vehicles." "I've never heard of them." "You wouldn't." His answer irritated me. "What does that mean?" "They're complicated." I folded my arms. "Then explain them." He sighed. The same sigh I had heard hundreds of times during our marriage. The sigh that always made me feel unreasonable. "Linda." He spoke slowly. "As I've told you before, these things aren't simple. I can understand if you explain." "You've never been interested before." "That doesn't mean I can't be interested now." He smiled, not warmly, patiently, almost like someone speaking to a child. "You've forgotten a lot lately." I stared at him. "What?" "You asked me about these transfers months ago." "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." "I've never seen these papers before." "You probably don't remember." The room suddenly felt colder. "I know what I remember." He gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm not criticizing you." His voice became softer. "I'm worried." "Worried about what?" "You've been forgetting little things." "I haven't." "You left the oven on last month." "I forgot once." "You called Ryan twice on the same day because you forgot you'd already spoken to him." "I wanted to check on the grandchildren." "You misplaced your purse." "I found it 20 minutes later." He nodded sympathetically. "Exactly." Every example sounded harmless. Every example had happened. But hearing them all together made me hesitate. Was I forgetting more than I realized? "No," I said quietly. This feels different. Daniel kissed the top of my head. Get some rest. Then he gathered every financial paper into the envelope. I'll take care of this. Those 4 words, I'll take care of this. For the first time in 36 years, I didn't let go. I kept one hand on the envelope. No. His eyes met mine. No, I want copies. His smile disappeared, only for a second. Then it returned. Of course. I'd like them tomorrow. Absolutely. He carried the envelope upstairs. The next morning, it was gone. When I asked about the copies, he laughed. I completely forgot. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither of us laughed. Over the next week, I couldn't stop thinking about those missing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whenever I asked another question, Daniel answered exactly the same way. You already asked me that. I explained it. Don't you remember? Every conversation ended with him questioning my memory instead of answering my questions. Then something happened that frightened me. Emily called. Mom, Dad mentioned you've seemed stressed lately. I've just been asking about retirement. She hesitated. He said you've been forgetting things. I froze. What exactly did he tell you? Nothing terrible. She sounded uncomfortable. He just said you're getting older. He said sometimes you confuse financial matters. My stomach dropped. He had already started talking, not only to me, to our children. A few days later, Ryan stopped by after work. He looked nervous. We sat on the porch drinking coffee. Finally, he cleared his throat. Mom? Yes. Have you thought about seeing a doctor? I stared at him. What? Dad says you've been having memory problems. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I don't have memory problems. Ryan quickly held up both hands. I know. I'm just saying maybe getting checked would put everyone's mind at ease. Everyone's, not my mind. Everyone else's. That single word hurt more than I expected. Someone had already convinced my children there was something wrong with me, and that someone wasn't a doctor. It was my husband. That evening, I confronted Daniel again. Did you tell Emily and Ryan I'm losing my memory? He looked surprised. I told them I'm concerned. I'm perfectly capable of remembering conversations. I never said you weren't. You implied it. I simply want the children prepared if your health changes. My health hasn't changed. He folded his newspaper. Why are you getting so emotional? I am emotional because you're telling people I'm confused. No. He looked directly into my eyes. You're proving my point. Those words echoed in my head all night. You're proving my point. Suddenly, every reaction I had became evidence against me. If I stayed calm, he dismissed me. If I became upset, he called it instability. There was no way to win. I started paying closer attention. The next morning, I found a notebook on Daniel's desk. It wasn't locked. Inside were dates, short notes. Linda forgot appointment. Repeated question. Couldn't locate keys. Confused about investments. Page after page. Months of observations. He wasn't simply remembering, he was documenting. My hands started shaking. This wasn't a husband keeping notes. This looked like someone building a case. I quickly took pictures with my phone before placing the notebook exactly where I found it. That afternoon, I searched through the filing cabinet in Daniel's office. Most folders contained tax returns and insurance papers. Then I found one labeled medical. Inside wasn't my medical history. It was a folder about cognitive decline, memory evaluations, early dementia, power of attorney, legal guardianship. Most of the forms were blank, but they were organized, prepared, waiting. A chill ran through my entire body. For the first time, I wasn't asking whether I had forgotten something. I was asking a much more terrifying question. What exactly was my husband planning? I quietly closed the drawer before he came home. That night, I lay awake beside the man I had trusted for 36 years. He slept peacefully. I barely closed my eyes, because I finally understood one thing. Daniel wasn't protecting me. He was preparing the world to stop believing me. And if I didn't uncover the truth soon, I might lose far more than my retirement savings. I might lose my own voice. The hardest part wasn't losing money. It wasn't even realizing my husband had lied to me. The hardest part was watching the people I loved slowly stop believing me. I told myself I was imagining it. I wanted to believe my family knew me better than anyone. I was wrong. A week after I found Daniel's notebook, Emily invited me to lunch. We met at a small cafe we had visited for years. Usually we spent hours talking. That afternoon felt different from the moment I sat down. Emily smiled, but it looked forced. She stirred her coffee even after the sugar had dissolved. Finally, she looked at me. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "Are you happy?" The question surprised me. "I don't think this is about happiness." She looked away. "Dad says you've been under a lot of stress." "I have. He says you're worrying over things that aren't really happening." My heart sank. "So that's why you invited me?" "No." She reached across the table. "I just want to help." "I don't need help." "You might." There it was again. Might. Not because she had seen me forget important things. Not because she had witnessed strange behavior. Because Daniel had been telling a story. I took a slow breath. "Emily, has your father ever shown you our retirement accounts?" She frowned. "No." "Has he explained why hundreds of thousands of dollars disappeared?" Her eyes widened. "What? He never told you?" She looked genuinely confused. "No." For one brief second, I felt hope. Maybe she simply hadn't heard my side. I quietly explained everything. The transfers, the hidden accounts, the notebook, the medical forms. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stared into her coffee. Then she quietly said something that broke my heart. "Mom." "Yes." "That doesn't sound like Dad." "Not, I don't believe you. Just, that doesn't sound like Dad." His reputation had become stronger than my words. I left lunch feeling emptier than when I arrived. Ryan wasn't much different. He came over the following weekend to help trim the trees. While we worked, he casually asked, "Have you considered counseling?" "Counseling? For everything going on?" "There wouldn't be anything going on if your father answered one simple question." Ryan climbed down from the ladder. "Mom?" "What?" "You've been accusing Dad of some pretty serious things." "I'm not accusing him. I'm describing what I found." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad showed me bank summaries." I froze. "He what?" "He said the transfers were normal." "He showed you the complete records?" "I don't know. He only showed me what he had." Exactly what he wanted Ryan to see. I suddenly realized Daniel wasn't just defending himself. He was controlling every piece of information. No one else had seen the whole picture, only the version he handed them. As weeks passed, little things began changing. Friends stopped calling. Book club meetings somehow happened without me. A neighbor I had known for 20 years suddenly seemed uncomfortable whenever we crossed paths. Even church felt different. After Sunday service, people smiled politely. but conversations ended the moment I approached. I couldn't prove they were avoiding me. I simply felt it. Then one Sunday, I overheard something. Two women stood behind me in the parking lot. I feel terrible for Daniel. So do I. It must be heartbreaking. I heard Linda's memory is getting much worse. I stood perfectly still. Neither woman realized I could hear them. They weren't gossiping to be cruel. They honestly believed they were discussing someone suffering from illness. I quietly walked to my car before they noticed me. Inside, I cried harder than I had in years. Not because strangers misunderstood me, because someone had carefully taught them to. Daniel continued playing the devoted husband. At church, he held my hand. He carried my Bible. He introduced me to new visitors with a warm smile. If Linda forgets your name, don't take it personally. Everyone laughed. I forced myself to laugh too. Inside, I was screaming. One evening, I finally confronted him again. Why are you telling everyone I'm losing my memory? He looked genuinely offended. I'm protecting you. From what? Embarrassment. I am not embarrassed. You should be grateful. For what? I'm helping people understand. I stared at him. Understand what? That you're changing? I'm not changing. His face softened. Linda. That calm voice again. I know this is difficult. No. I shook my head. This is deliberate. His eyes narrowed for the briefest moment. Then he smiled. You need some sleep. He walked away, as if the conversation had never happened. That night, I couldn't stay inside the house. I took a walk around the neighborhood. Near the corner lived Martha Collins. She was 73, widowed, retired from teaching high school history. She had always been observant. As I passed her porch, she called my name. Linda. I turned. Come sit for a minute. I almost kept walking. Instead, I climbed the porch steps. She poured us both iced tea. For several minutes, we sat in silence. Then Martha surprised me. I've been waiting for you to stop by. I looked at her. What do you mean? She leaned closer. I think something's wrong. Those 4 words nearly made me cry. What do you mean? She lowered her voice. I've watched Daniel. My heart skipped. For months. What have you noticed? She sighed. He talks for you. I nodded slowly. He answers questions before you can. I nodded again. And every time someone asks how you're doing? She paused. He always mentions your memory. I felt tears forming. So I'm not imagining it. No. She shook her head firmly. I taught teenagers for 40 years. I know manipulation when I see it. It was the first time anyone had said that word. Manipulation, not concern, not misunderstanding. Manipulation. I couldn't stop crying. Martha reached over and squeezed my hand. Listen carefully. I'm listening. You've started apologizing for things that aren't your fault. I looked at her. You do it every conversation. I hadn't noticed. I have. She smiled gently. And that's why I'm worried. I sat there in silence. Then she asked the question no one else had asked. Have you spoken to a lawyer? I laughed bitterly. A lawyer. If your husband is moving money and convincing people you're mentally unfit, she paused. You need advice before it's too late. Her words frightened me, because they matched my own fears. Before I left, Martha disappeared inside the house. She returned holding a small card. My niece. I looked down. Sarah Mitchell, family law attorney. She's honest, Martha said. If nothing is wrong, she'll tell you. And if something is wrong, Martha didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked me directly in the eyes. Then you'll finally have someone in your corner. I drove home holding that business card so tightly it bent. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear. Not confidence, not relief, just the smallest spark of hope. But when I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Daniel standing at the front window, watching. The moment I stepped inside, he asked a question that made my blood run cold. "Where have you been?" "Walking." "You stopped at Martha's." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "Yes." "What did you talk about?" I forced myself to stay calm. "Just neighbors talking." He smiled, the same calm smile I had come to fear. "Good." Then he added quietly, "You know, some people enjoy creating problems where there aren't any." I said nothing. Neither did he. But as I walked upstairs, one thought kept repeating in my mind. How did he know exactly where I had been? And how long had he been watching me? I didn't call the lawyer immediately. The business card stayed in my purse for 3 days. Every morning I looked at it. Every night I put it back. Part of me still hoped I was wrong. Maybe Daniel had a reasonable explanation. Maybe the hidden accounts were legal. Maybe I had misunderstood everything. But then something happened that made my decision for me. I received another letter from the investment company. This time, it was addressed to Daniel only. He wasn't home. I didn't open it. I simply placed it on the kitchen counter. An hour later, Daniel walked in. The first thing he asked wasn't how my day had been. It wasn't whether I wanted dinner. It wasn't even hello. He looked directly at the counter. "Did the mail come?" "Yes." "Anything important?" "I don't know." He grabbed the envelope so quickly it almost slipped from his hand. Then he smiled. "Just paperwork." He carried it straight upstairs. 5 minutes later, I quietly walked into his office. The envelope was gone. So was the paper shredder. The wastebasket was full of tiny strips. He had destroyed the letter before I even knew what it contained. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. The next morning, after Daniel left for work, I called Sarah Mitchell. Her receptionist answered. "Mitchell Family Law." "My name is Linda Harper." There was a brief silence before I continued. "I think I need help." The receptionist spoke kindly. "We can see you this afternoon." At 2 o'clock, I parked outside a small brick office building downtown. Sarah greeted me herself. She looked to be in her early 40s. Professional, calm. She shook my hand firmly. "I'm Sarah." "I'm Linda." She smiled. "Come in." Her office felt warm instead of intimidating. Family photographs sat on a bookshelf. There was a box of tissues beside the couch. That somehow made me nervous. As soon as we sat down, she asked one simple question. "What brings you here today?" I expected to speak for 5 minutes. Instead, I talked for nearly 2 hours. I told her everything. The missing money, the secret accounts, the notebook, the medical forms, the conversations with Emily and Ryan, the church, the neighbors, the questions about my memory. Sarah interrupted only once. "When did all this begin?" I thought carefully. "The financial transfers?" "No." She leaned forward. "The control." I sat quietly. Finally, I whispered, "I think years ago." She nodded slowly. "That matters." When I finished, she didn't rush to give advice. She opened a yellow legal pad and reviewed her notes. Then she looked at me. "I have a few questions." "Okay." "Who handled your finances during the marriage?" "Daniel." "Did you regularly review statements?" "No." "Did you sign documents without reading them?" I lowered my eyes. "Yes." "Did he encourage that?" "He always said he had everything under control." She wrote something down. Were you ever diagnosed with memory problems? No. Have you ever failed a cognitive evaluation? I've never had one. She nodded again. Then she asked the question that changed everything. Linda. Yes. Has anyone besides Daniel actually told you they believe you're losing your memory? I thought carefully. Emily, Ryan, the church members, the neighbors. Then I realized something. No. What do you mean? They're repeating what Daniel told them. Sarah smiled for the first time. Exactly. She leaned back. That's important. I frowned. Why? Because hearsay isn't evidence. Those 3 words gave me hope. She continued. I've handled cases involving financial abuse. I looked at her. This isn't uncommon. It isn't. No. She folded her hands. The money concerns me. But something else concerns me even more. The notebook, yes. And the medical forms? She looked directly into my eyes. If someone is creating written records suggesting mental decline, she paused. While also controlling the finances? Another pause. That's a pattern. I felt cold again. A pattern of what? Control. She didn't hesitate. Possibly coercive control. The phrase was unfamiliar. She explained. Some people don't use physical violence. They control information. They isolate. They damage credibility. They prepare others to doubt the victim. Every sentence sounded like my marriage. I whispered, so I'm not imagining this. No. She shook her head firmly. You're not. Tears filled my eyes, not because I was sad, because someone finally believed me, without asking me to prove I wasn't crazy. Sarah handed me a tissue. Then she became all business. I want copies of every financial document you can legally access. I have some photographs. Good. I want those. What else? Bank statements. Retirement records? Tax returns? Insurance policies? Property deeds. If you find anything unusual, don't confront Daniel. I nodded. Why not? Because once people realize they're being investigated. She paused. They often hide more evidence. That made sense. Then she surprised me. I also want you to keep a journal. A journal. Every conversation. Every date. Every witness. Every comment about your memory. Write it down immediately. Details matter. I agreed. Before I left, Sarah asked one final question. Does Daniel know you're here? No. Keep it that way. Driving home, I felt stronger than I had in months. Not because my problems were solved. Because someone had given them names. Manipulation. Control. Financial abuse. Those weren't random events anymore. They were connected. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly gathered documents whenever I could. Old tax returns, insurance records, property files. Every time Daniel left the house, I searched another drawer. Sometimes I found nothing. Sometimes I found pieces that didn't fit. One evening, I discovered 3 bank statements hidden inside an old briefcase. The account number didn't match any account I knew. The balance was over $200,000. I photographed every page. The next morning, they were gone. Daniel had moved them. Fortunately, I already had the pictures. Sarah studied the photographs carefully. Then she frowned. This account isn't listed anywhere else. What does that mean? It means someone intentionally left it off the financial disclosures. Is that legal? No. She picked up her phone. I need my paralegal. For the next hour, they compared every document I had brought. The deeper they looked, the quieter Sarah became. Finally, she closed the folder. Linda. Her voice was serious. These numbers don't match. What numbers? The retirement distributions. The taxes. The declared assets? They conflict. So, she looked directly at me. I think someone altered the records. My heart pounded. Daniel, I'm not making accusations yet, but these inconsistencies deserve investigation. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope growing stronger than fear. Then Sarah said something that worried me again. There's one problem. What if Daniel planned this carefully? She tapped the folder. He probably planned for someone to question him. I stared at the paperwork. So what do? We verify everything independently. How? We subpoena records. We trace transfers. We follow the money. She smiled slightly. Paper leaves footprints. I almost smiled too. Then my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. Where are you? Just grocery shopping. Need anything? There was a long pause before another message appeared. You were downtown, not at the grocery store. I stared at the screen. My blood ran cold. He knew. Maybe not where I had been. Maybe not with whom. But somehow, he knew I had lied. And suddenly, I wondered whether every step I took was already being watched. After Daniel texted you were downtown, not at the grocery store, I sat in my car for almost 10 minutes. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly to type. The only question running through my mind was simple. How did he know? Had he followed me? Was someone watching me? Or had he somehow tracked my phone? When I finally walked into the house, Daniel was sitting in the living room watching the evening news. He looked completely relaxed. He smiled. There you are. I forced myself to smile back. Traffic was awful. He muted the television. Did you find everything you needed? I think so. He looked directly into my eyes. What store did you go to? There it was. Not a casual question. A test. The Kroger on Main Street. He nodded slowly. I thought so. He turned the television volume back up. The conversation was over. But I knew something had changed. He wasn't asking questions because he was curious. He was checking whether my answers matched what he already knew. The next morning, Sarah called. I need you to come in. Is something wrong? I'd rather explain in person. An hour later, I was back in her office. She spread several documents across the table. I've compared the statements you photographed. What did you find? She pointed at one page. This transfer? It showed $120,000 moving from our retirement account. She placed another document beside it. The receiving account. I frowned. The numbers don't match. Exactly. The money didn't stay there. So where did it go? She slid over another sheet. It moved again. Another transfer, then another, then another. The money had bounced through multiple accounts before disappearing. It looks intentional, she said. Someone was trying to make it difficult to follow. I stared at the paperwork. Can you still trace it? Eventually. She paused. If the records still exist? Those last 4 words worried me. What do you mean? If someone destroys financial records before we subpoena them. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I understood. Time was working against us. That afternoon, I began quietly searching the house again. Daniel had always kept old boxes in the basement. Tax records, insurance files, mortgage papers. I started opening every box. Most contained ordinary documents. Then I found an old banker's box labeled 2009. Inside were dozens of folders. At first glance, they looked boring. Then I noticed something. Several folders were empty. Not messy, not partially filled, completely empty. Only the labels remained. Investment records, retirement transfers, client files. Every folder that sounded important had been cleaned out. I quickly took pictures. Then I noticed something even stranger. Dust. Every box had a thick layer of dust except one. Someone had opened it recently. Very recently. I immediately texted Sarah. Someone has been removing files. Her reply came almost instantly. Stop searching for today. Why? Because if he's removing records, he may suspect someone else is looking. That evening, Daniel came home carrying pizza. He seemed unusually cheerful. I thought we'd have dinner together. I forced a smile. Sounds nice. Halfway through dinner, he casually asked, Have you been in the basement? I almost dropped my fork. No. You sure? Why, I thought I smelled dust. I laughed nervously. Probably the furnace. He watched me for another second, then smiled. Probably. I barely slept that night. The following morning, Sarah introduced me to her paralegal, Melissa. Melissa had already started requesting publicly available financial records. She looked frustrated. We're missing years. What do you mean? There should be transaction histories. There aren't. Could the bank have deleted them? Sarah answered. Banks don't simply delete records. Melissa nodded. Someone requested paper copies years ago. And no digital history beyond certain dates? Sarah frowned. Convenient. Very convenient. Then Melissa said something that changed the direction of the investigation. I called one of the brokerage offices. What happened? They told me a representative handled most of the transfers personally. Sarah looked interested. Name? Melissa checked her notes. Thomas Green. Still employed? No. He retired last year. Sarah immediately looked at me. We need to find him. For the first time, there was another person connected to Daniel's financial decisions. Maybe someone who knew the truth. Hope returned. But only briefly, because 2 days later, Melissa called again. I found Mr. Green. Great. He refused to talk. Why? He said he doesn't remember anything. Sarah didn't believe that for a second. Neither did I. People rarely forget moving hundreds of thousands of dollars. Someone had gotten to him first. That afternoon, another strange thing happened. I stopped by the grocery store. As I loaded bags into my trunk, I heard someone call my name. Mrs. Harper. I turned around. It was David, a young man who had worked at Daniel's financial office years ago. I remembered him because he had helped organize our retirement seminar. He looked nervous. Can we talk? Of course. He glanced around the parking lot before speaking. I shouldn't be saying this. My heart raced. What is it? I left Mr. Harper's office 3 years ago. I know. He wasn't honest. I stared at him. What do you mean? David swallowed hard. I handled paperwork. Sometimes clients asked questions, and Mr. Harper hated questions. He lowered his voice. I saw him move files, destroy files, replace documents. I could barely breathe. Did you tell anyone? No. Why not? I needed the job. He looked ashamed. I've regretted it ever since. I reached into my purse for Sarah's business card. Would you tell this to my attorney? His face immediately changed. I can't. Why, I signed confidentiality papers. Those don't protect fraud. I know. He looked terrified. But I'm afraid. Before I could say anything else, he hurried toward his car. Wait. He stopped only long enough to say one more sentence. Be careful. Then he drove away. I immediately called Sarah. She listened carefully. When I finished, she became silent. Finally, she said, "This is bigger than I thought." What do you mean? If documents disappeared? If former employees are afraid? If financial records conflict? She paused. We may not be dealing with one lie. We may be dealing with years of deception. That evening, I returned home feeling both hopeful and terrified. As I walked toward the front porch, I noticed something unusual. The front door wasn't fully closed. I was certain I had locked it. I slowly stepped inside. Nothing looked out of place. The furniture hadn't moved. The television was off. The kitchen looked normal. Then I walked upstairs. My bedroom closet stood open. My jewelry box had been moved. Not stolen, moved. I immediately checked the small lockbox where I kept copies of the financial photographs Sarah had asked me to save. It was empty. Every copy was gone. Only the original lockbox remained. Someone had opened it. Someone knew exactly what they were looking for. My phone rang. It was Sarah. Before I could even speak, she asked, "Linda, are your copies still in the house?" I looked at the empty box. "No." She didn't sound surprised. "I was afraid of that. What do I do?" "Come straight here. Don't confront Daniel." As I grabbed my purse, I heard a car pulling into the driveway. Daniel was home early. I froze. His footsteps echoed through the front hallway. Then I heard him call my name. "Linda." I quietly closed the empty lockbox. For the first time in 36 years, I was genuinely afraid of the man I had married. I slipped the empty lockbox back onto the closet shelf, just as Daniel's footsteps reached the bedroom. "Linda, I'm up here." He walked in carrying his briefcase. "You look pale." "I've had a headache." He studied my face. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. "You should rest." I nodded. "I think I will." He kissed my forehead. The gesture would have looked loving to anyone watching. To me, it felt like a warning. That night, I barely slept. Every small sound in the house made me open my eyes. Around 2 a.m, I heard footsteps downstairs. Very slow, very careful. I quietly got out of bed. Daniel wasn't beside me. I eased the bedroom door open. A faint light glowed beneath his office door. I walked down the hallway without making a sound. The office door was almost closed. Through the narrow opening, I saw Daniel feeding papers into the shredder. Page after page. He wasn't reading them. He already knew what they were. He simply wanted them gone. Then he stopped, opened a desk drawer, removed another folder, fed that into the shredder too. The machine hummed for nearly 10 minutes. When he finally turned off the light, I hurried back to bed before he reached the stairs. The next morning, I told Sarah everything. She didn't seem surprised. "I expected this." "What do we do?" "We move faster." That afternoon, she filed emergency requests to preserve financial records. Then she looked at me. "Linda." "Yes?" "You should prepare yourself." "For what?" "He may become more aggressive." I swallowed hard. "You think he'll hurt me?" She answered carefully. "I don't know." But people who believe they're losing control often become unpredictable. Those words stayed with me all day. 2 mornings later, I received another shock. Emily knocked on my front door. She looked exhausted. "Mom, can we talk?" "Of course." She walked inside but didn't sit down. Instead, she stood in the kitchen, twisting her wedding ring. Finally, she spoke. "Dad asked me something." "What?" "He wanted me to sign papers." What kind of papers? She pulled several folded pages from her purse. I refused. I unfolded them. My heart nearly stopped. They were documents recommending a medical evaluation. For me, attached was a statement claiming family members had observed progressive memory impairment. At the bottom, there was a blank line for Emily's signature, another for Ryan's, another for Daniel's. Only Daniel had signed. When did he ask you? Yesterday. What did he say? Emily looked embarrassed. He said it was only a precaution. He said if you refused treatment, things could become dangerous. I slowly lowered the papers. Did you believe him? She looked away. I didn't know what to believe. At least she was honest. I told him I wouldn't sign until I talked to you. Relief washed over me. For the first time, someone in my family had questioned Daniel instead of me. Thank you. Tears filled her eyes. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize. Yes, I do. She sat beside me. I should have listened sooner. I reached for her hand. I understand why you didn't. She whispered. He sounded so convincing. I closed my eyes. I know. Emily left with more questions than answers. But something had changed. A tiny crack had appeared in Daniel's perfect image. That afternoon, Sarah examined the evaluation papers. This is important. Why, he isn't just controlling money anymore. She tapped the documents. He's creating medical evidence. But none of it's true. I know. The court won't know that automatically. She immediately contacted an independent physician. I want you evaluated. My stomach tightened. What if they think something's wrong? Sarah smiled. If there's nothing wrong, the examination protects you. 3 days later, I met Dr. Michael Rosen. He specialized in cognitive assessments. For nearly 3 hours, he tested my memory. Names, numbers, patterns, stories, dates, problem solving. At the end, he smiled. You've done very well. I almost laughed from relief. So I'm not losing my mind. He looked confused. Not based on anything I observed. He handed Sarah a written report 2 days later. Normal cognitive function, no evidence of dementia, no indication of significant memory impairment. I cried when I read those words, not because they surprised me, because someone finally put the truth on paper. I thought things might finally start improving. Instead, they became worse. Sarah called late Friday afternoon. I have bad news. What happened? Several witnesses no longer want to cooperate. What witnesses? Former employees. My accountant. Even one bank representative. I felt sick. Why, they won't say. Did someone threaten them? I can't prove it. She paused. But the timing concerns me. By Monday morning, another problem appeared. David, the former employee from the grocery store. His phone had been disconnected. His apartment was empty. Neighbors said he had moved, without leaving a forwarding address. It was as though he had vanished. Sarah slammed her notebook shut. I don't like this. Neither did I. The people who might know the truth were disappearing one by one. Then came the biggest blow. The court officially scheduled our first hearing, only 6 weeks away. Sarah stared at the notice. We're running out of time. So, what happens now? We keep building the case. But we still don't know where all the money went. We'll find it. She sounded confident. I wished I felt the same. That evening, Daniel seemed happier than he had in months. He cooked dinner, opened a bottle of wine, even suggested we watch an old movie together. The kindness felt unnatural, almost rehearsed. Halfway through dinner, he smiled. I heard from an old colleague today. Oh? He said lawyers usually make divorces ugly. I nearly stopped breathing. I hadn't mentioned divorce. Neither had Sarah. Yet somehow, Daniel already knew I had hired an attorney. I carefully asked, "What makes you think I talked to a lawyer?" He shrugged. Just a feeling. No, not a feeling. Someone had told him, or someone was watching. After dinner, I went upstairs. Inside my nightstand sat the notebook Sarah had asked me to keep. I wrote everything down. The shredded documents, the medical evaluation, Emily refusing to sign, the disappearing witnesses, Daniel mentioning lawyers. As I closed the notebook, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. Just one sentence. I need to see you first thing tomorrow. We found something. I stared at the message for a long time. For weeks, every discovery had made the situation worse. I wondered what could possibly be left. I would find out the next morning. I had no idea that what Sarah had uncovered would prove one terrifying truth. Daniel hadn't started stealing from me after retirement. He had been planning this for years. When I arrived at Sarah's office the next morning, she didn't waste a second. She spread a long sheet of paper across the conference table. It looked like a timeline. Colored lines connected dates, bank transfers, property purchases, retirement withdrawals, insurance changes. At first, it looked like chaos. Then Sarah pointed to the earliest date. Look here. I leaned closer. 8 years ago? I frowned. I thought the missing money started after we retired. So did I. She traced the line with her finger. It didn't. She pointed to another document. This transfer happened while you were still working. Then another. And this one. Another. And this. Each transaction was relatively small. $15,000, $22,000, $18,000. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would immediately raise suspicion. I slowly understood. He wasn't stealing everything at once. Sarah nodded. He was taking small amounts. So I wouldn't notice. Exactly. The room became very quiet. I whispered, 8 years. She corrected me. Actually, she pointed farther back. Almost 10. 10 years. For 10 years, Daniel had been moving our money while eating dinner with me every night. For 10 years, he had smiled across the breakfast table. For 10 years, he had kissed me goodbye before work. Every memory suddenly felt different. Sarah slid another document toward me. This bothered me. It was one of our old tax returns. I had signed it. So, look at the date. I did. The return had been filed on April 12th. Then she showed me my work calendar from the elementary school. You were attending a 3-day librarian conference? I remembered it immediately. I was in Cincinnati. She nodded. Yet, according to this document, she tapped the signature. You signed it here in Columbus. I stared at my own signature. It looked real, almost. Then I noticed something. The L in Linda curved differently, very slightly. I don't think I signed this. Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened another folder. Inside were 6 more documents. Every signature looked like mine. Every signature was just a little different. My stomach tightened. Are these? She nodded. I believe someone practiced your signature. I couldn't speak. 36 years of marriage. And somewhere along the way, my husband had learned to write my name better than I could. Sarah quietly said, We'll have a handwriting expert review them. I nodded without saying anything. A few minutes later, Melissa entered carrying another folder. I found something. Sarah looked up. What? A storage unit. My head turned. What storage unit? Melissa placed a rental agreement on the table. It was leased 6 years ago. In Daniel's name? No? She looked at me. In both of your names? I stared at the document. I've never seen this. Sarah looked interested. What address? Melissa handed over the contract. The storage facility was only 20 minutes from our house. We need access. I frowned. Can we just go there? Sarah shook her head. Not yet. If Daniel stored records there, we don't want him emptying it before we see what's inside. She immediately filed another legal request. By lunchtime, we had one more surprise. Melissa walked back into the room. I located Thomas Green, the retired financial representative. I sat forward. He agreed to meet. Melissa hesitated. Sort of. What does that mean? He refused to come here. But he'll speak privately. Sarah smiled. That's progress. The meeting was arranged for the following evening at a quiet diner outside town. Sarah insisted I stay away. If Daniel somehow learns about this, I don't want anyone connecting you to the meeting. The next 24 hours felt endless. I barely concentrated on anything. Every time my phone rang, I jumped. Every time Daniel looked at me, I wondered what he knew. The following evening, Sarah called just after 9. Her voice sounded tense. We met Mr. Green. What happened? He was terrified. Did he talk? Eventually, I held my breath. He confirmed Daniel personally handled nearly every transfer. I closed my eyes. What else? He said Daniel insisted on paper records. Why? So there would be fewer digital trails. Another piece fit into place. Then Sarah became quiet. What? He also said something strange. What? He kept repeating? She checked her notes. I told him not to do it. Did he explain? No. He refused. Every time I asked, he changed the subject. I felt disappointed. So we still don't know everything. No. But we know he knows more. The next morning, Sarah received another call. This time from Thomas himself. He canceled everything, refused further contact, would not answer questions, would not sign a statement, would not testify. Just like that. He disappeared behind silence again. Sarah looked furious. Someone got to him. You think Daniel... I can't prove it. But the timing speaks for itself. That afternoon, I drove home feeling defeated. As I pulled into the driveway, Daniel was trimming the hedges. He smiled. Long day. Very. He rested both hands on the hedge trimmer. You know? What? I've been thinking. About, maybe we should sell the house. The words caught me off guard. Why, downsize. Start fresh. I stared at him. The house, the retirement accounts, the missing money, the storage unit, everything suddenly connected? If we sold the house, another major asset would disappear into accounts only Daniel controlled. No? He looked surprised. No, I don't want to sell. He laughed softly. We don't have to decide today. But I noticed something. His smile didn't reach his eyes. That evening, after Daniel went to bed, I checked our online banking account. The password no longer worked. I tried again. Still nothing. The account had been locked. The next morning, I called the bank. I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper. The representative sounded polite. The primary account holder requested enhanced security. Yesterday afternoon. I thanked her and hung up. Yesterday afternoon, exactly when Daniel suggested selling the house. He was closing every door, every account, every source of information. Sarah wasn't surprised. He's preparing for litigation. So he knows. He may not know everything, but he knows enough. She leaned back in her chair. Linda? Yes. I need to ask you something difficult. What? If this goes to trial? Are you prepared for your children to hear painful truths? I didn't answer immediately, because I already knew what those truths would do. Emily and Ryan had loved their father all their lives. The man I now knew was a stranger. Before I left, Sarah gave me one final update. We're still looking for someone. Who? The accountant who prepared several of Daniel's earlier financial reports. Do you know his name? Yes. Mark Ellis. Can he help? If he talks? She paused. He may be able to explain every missing dollar. Hope flickered again. Just a little. But as I walked to my car, Sarah called after me. Linda? I turned. What? We've been trying to reach Mr. Ellis since yesterday. And her expression changed. No one has seen him. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. He isn't answering his phone. He didn't show up for work. His office says he never came in. She took a slow breath. I think our most important witness has just disappeared. When Sarah told me that Mark Ellis had disappeared, I refused to believe it. There has to be an explanation. I hope so, she replied. But right now, no one can reach him. For the next 3 days, our entire case seemed to stop moving. Sarah's office called his accounting firm. Nothing. Melissa searched public records. Nothing. A private investigator visited his apartment. Empty. His neighbors said they hadn't seen him since the previous weekend. His office manager claimed he had simply failed to show up for work. No resignation, no vacation request, no warning. He was simply gone. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Not because I knew him, because he might have been the one person who could explain every missing dollar. Without him, we had documents. Without him, we had suspicious transfers. Without him, we had forged signatures. But we still didn't have someone who could tell the complete story. Sarah tried to reassure me. We've won difficult cases before. But, she sighed, witnesses matter. That single sentence stayed with me. Witnesses matter. The following week, another problem appeared. Daniel officially filed his response in court. Sarah called as soon as she received it. You need to read this. I drove to her office immediately. She handed me the document. The first page looked routine. The second page nearly made me sick. Daniel wasn't simply denying my claims. He was accusing me. He claimed I had become increasingly forgetful over the past several years. He claimed I had voluntarily asked him to manage all financial decisions. He claimed I frequently misunderstood routine banking transactions. Worst of all, he attached statements from people I knew. Church members, neighbors, even one distant cousin. Each statement described me as confused, forgetful, easily overwhelmed. I recognized almost every name, people I had smiled at every Sunday, people who had shared meals in my home. They genuinely believed they were helping. None of them knew they had become part of Daniel's plan. I felt tears coming. Sarah quietly took the papers from my hands. Don't focus on these. How can I not? They're lying. No. She shook her head. They're mistaken. There is a difference. She was right. Most of them weren't malicious. They had simply trusted the wrong person. Then she showed me something else. Daniel had attached copies of my medical appointments, not diagnoses, appointments, routine annual checkups, eye exams, blood pressure visits. He arranged them to suggest a pattern of declining health. Anyone reading the documents quickly might assume I had ongoing cognitive problems. It was clever. Very clever. He knows exactly how to tell a story, I whispered. Sarah nodded. And now, we have to tell the real one. Over the next several days, we prepared for the first hearing. Every evening, I organized paperwork. Every morning, Sarah requested more records. Still, one question remained unanswered. Where was Mark Ellis? Then something unexpected happened. Ryan came to see me. He looked exhausted. I need to ask you something. What is it? He sat quietly before speaking. I found something in Dad's office. I looked at him carefully. What? A file. My heart skipped. What kind of file? He didn't know I saw it. Ryan reached into his backpack. He handed me a yellow folder. Inside were printed emails. Most involved financial transfers. One email caught my attention immediately. From Mark Ellis to Daniel Harper. The subject line read, "This cannot continue." I stared at the screen. The email was short. Daniel, I signed the paperwork because you assured me everything had been authorized. After reviewing the recent transfers, I am no longer comfortable. If these signatures are not legitimate, I cannot continue participating. Please do not ask me to process any additional transactions. Mark. I looked at Ryan. Where did you find this? In Dad's office. Did he see you? I don't think so. Sarah read the email 3 times. This is important. But it isn't enough. Why? We need Mark himself. The email helps. His testimony would be far stronger. Ryan looked guilty. I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize, I said. You've already done more than enough. For the first time since this nightmare began, Ryan hugged me. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I held him tightly. I know. I really thought Dad was protecting you. So did I. When he left, I cried. Not because I was sad, because one of my children had finally seen the truth. Unfortunately, Daniel noticed the change almost immediately. That evening, he called Ryan repeatedly. Ryan ignored every call. Then Emily received 3 messages asking why Ryan had suddenly become distant. Daniel knew something was changing. The next morning, Sarah's investigator called. I found Mark's car. Everyone in the office became silent. Where? Airport parking. My heart raced. So, he left? We're checking. Several hours later, we learned the truth. Mark had purchased a one-way ticket, but he never boarded the flight. His luggage remained unclaimed. His car remained parked. No one knew where he had gone after entering the airport. The mystery became even stranger. That evening, I received an anonymous envelope in my mailbox. No return address, no stamp. Someone had delivered it by hand. Inside was a single photograph. Mark Ellis, standing outside a coffee shop. The picture looked recent. On the back, someone had written 5 words. Stop looking for him. Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. I immediately drove to Sarah's office. She examined the photograph carefully. This wasn't mailed. I know. It was hand-delivered. She looked worried. Someone wanted you to receive this personally. Daniel, I don't know. But whoever sent it, she paused, knows where you live. A chill ran through my body. The next few days became unbearable. Every unfamiliar car felt suspicious. Every phone call made me nervous. Then, just when I thought things couldn't become more stressful, the court confirmed our hearing date. Only 10 days remained. Sarah gathered our team. We proceed with what we have. What if Mark never appears? Melissa asked. Sarah looked around the room. Then we prove the documents. We prove the forgery. We prove the financial trail. We keep moving. She sounded confident. I wanted to believe her. But deep inside, I knew something. Daniel expected to win. He had spent years preparing for this moment. He had controlled the money, the documents, the witnesses, even the story everyone believed. As I left Sarah's office, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. I hope you're ready. The judge will hear the truth. I stared at the screen. For the first time, I realized he wasn't bluffing. He honestly believed he had already won. And without Mark Ellis, I was beginning to fear he might be right. The closer we came to court, the more dangerous every day felt. Not because Daniel threatened me. He never raised his voice. He never slammed a door. He smiled. He made coffee. He asked if I wanted breakfast. That frightened me more than anger ever could. It meant he still believed he was winning. 3 days after receiving his message, the judge will hear the truth. Sarah called before sunrise. I need you at the office. Did something happen? I think we found our break. I drove there immediately. When I arrived, Melissa had several boxes spread across the conference table. Brown cardboard, dusty, old. Where did these come from? I asked. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. The storage unit. I stared at her. I thought we couldn't get inside. We couldn't. Until yesterday. She explained that the judge had approved emergency access because of the risk that financial evidence might disappear. Daniel had not yet been notified. For the first time, we were ahead of him. Melissa carefully opened the first box. Inside were old tax folders, insurance files, canceled checks, nothing unusual. The second box contained household records, utility bills, mortgage paperwork, vacation receipts. Again, nothing important. I felt my excitement fading. Then Melissa lifted the lid on the third box. Everyone became quiet. Inside were dozens of thick accounting binders, original records, not copies. Sarah slowly picked up the first binder. She turned several pages, then stopped. Linda? I leaned forward. What? She held up a document. I've never seen this before. It was a transfer authorization. The amount exceeded $200,000. The signature looked like mine, but attached behind it was another page, an internal processing sheet. Handwritten across the top were 3 words. Signature questioned internally. Sarah looked at me. This changes everything. Why? Someone inside the brokerage questioned whether your signature was genuine. I felt my heart racing. They knew, at least one employee did. She continued searching. 5 minutes later, Melissa gasped. What? She held up another folder. This one has correspondence. Inside were dozens of printed emails. Many involved routine business. Then one caught Sarah's attention. From Daniel Harper. To internal processing. Subject ignore. Previous concern. The email read, Linda approved everything in person. No further verification needed. Proceed immediately. Sarah looked at me. If he never brought you in? This statement is false. I never saw these papers. I know. She carefully placed the email into an evidence folder. For the next 2 hours, we reviewed every binder. The more we read, the stronger our case became. There were handwritten notes, transfer requests, authorization logs, even internal compliance questions. Daniel had answered every concern himself. Without me, without witnesses, without proof. Still, one problem remained. There isn't a direct confession, Sarah said. I nodded. We still need someone who can explain these documents. Exactly. The paperwork proved irregularities. But a witness could explain how those irregularities happened. Mark Ellis remained missing. Thomas Green refused to testify. Our biggest problem still existed. As we packed the files, Melissa noticed one final envelope taped to the bottom of the last box. It had been hidden beneath the cardboard. She carefully removed it. No label, no markings. Inside were 6 original signature cards. Mine, signed years apart. Sarah compared them to the disputed documents. Immediately, she noticed something. "Look here." She pointed to the letter H in Harper. Every authentic signature curved naturally. Every disputed signature stopped slightly too early. The difference was tiny, almost invisible. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. "They're forged." Sarah nodded. "I believe a handwriting expert can explain this clearly." Hope returned. Real hope. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we were finally moving forward. Then Sarah checked the bottom of the envelope again. There was one more folded page, a receipt. Storage unit rental renewal, signed only 4 months earlier. I frowned. "Daniel renewed the unit recently." "Yes." "But why leave these records behind?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked thoughtful. "Maybe..." "What?" "Maybe he forgot." I shook my head. "Daniel doesn't forget things." "No," she agreed. "He doesn't." "So why..." The room fell silent. Finally, Melissa spoke. "What if these weren't the files he meant to keep?" Sarah looked at her. "You think there are more?" Melissa nodded. "If he separated important documents, these may simply be the ones he overlooked." The possibility chilled me. If this evidence had been left behind by accident, what had he successfully hidden? That afternoon, Sarah filed the new documents with the court. Our evidence suddenly became much stronger. The handwriting expert agreed to testify. The document examiner confirmed several signatures appeared inconsistent. Every new report made Daniel's story harder to believe. But late that evening, another surprise arrived. Daniel's attorney filed additional disclosures. Sarah called immediately. "You need to see this." I drove back to her office. She handed me a thick folder. Inside were new medical records, not fake ones, real appointment summaries, routine visits, blood pressure checks, annual physicals, but someone had highlighted isolated words: forgetfulness, stress, fatigue, normal comments doctors often write. Separated from their context, they looked alarming. "They're twisting ordinary medical notes," I whispered. "Exactly," Sarah sighed. "They're building a narrative." Every page told the same story. Not through lies, through selective truth. That was Daniel's greatest strength. He rarely invented evidence. He rearranged it. The hearing was now only 4 days away. Sarah gathered the entire legal team. "We have enough to challenge the financial documents." She looked around the room. "But we're still vulnerable." Melissa nodded. "Witnesses." Sarah agreed. "The judge may ask why no banker or accountant is here." Everyone fell silent. I quietly asked, "What if Mark never comes?" No one answered, because no one knew. The next morning, I decided to visit the storage facility one more time. Not to search, simply to understand. The manager recognized me immediately. "I'm sorry for everything you're going through." "Thank you." As I turned to leave, he suddenly remembered something. "Oh." "What?" "One of your husband's old units." I stopped. "What about it?" "He rented 2. I froze. 2? He checked his computer. "Yes. The first one closed years ago. The second is the one your attorney opened." I looked at him in disbelief. "Can you show me the records?" He frowned. I'm not sure. After checking with his supervisor, he returned. The older file was destroyed. When, last month, exactly 1 month earlier, right around the time I first questioned Daniel about the missing money, I thanked him and walked outside. As soon as I reached my car, I called Sarah. He had another storage unit. She became very quiet. When was it emptied? Last month? She exhaled slowly. So he was already cleaning up. The realization hit both of us at the same time. Daniel hadn't started preparing after I hired a lawyer. He had started preparing the moment I opened that first retirement statement. Everything since then. Every missing file, every disappearing witness, every shredded document, every changed password, had been part of one desperate effort. Not to tell the truth, but to erase it. We finally had enough evidence to expose the financial fraud. But unless something extraordinary happened, the courtroom would still come down to one question. Would the judge believe the paperwork? Or believe Daniel? The morning of the hearing arrived faster than I was ready for. I barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the courtroom. I saw Daniel smiling. I saw the judge reading papers. I saw myself standing alone. At 6 o'clock that morning, I stood in my kitchen holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then someone knocked softly on the front door. It was Emily. Ryan stood beside her. Neither of them said anything at first. Ryan stepped forward and hugged me. We're here. 3 simple words. But they meant everything. For months, I had felt abandoned. Now my children stood beside me. Not because they knew how the case would end, because they finally wanted to hear the truth for themselves. The drive to the courthouse felt strangely quiet. Sarah reviewed our strategy one last time. We stay focused. We answer only what we're asked. We don't argue. We let the documents speak. I nodded. What about Daniel? Ignore him. I'll try. She looked directly at me. Linda. Yes. He wants an emotional reaction? Don't give him one. The courthouse looked exactly as I remembered from years earlier. Tall stone columns, American flags waving in the breeze, people moving quickly through security. Some looked angry. Some looked frightened. Some simply looked exhausted. I wondered which one I looked like. Inside the courtroom, Daniel was already there. Perfect suit. Perfect tie. Perfect smile. He stood talking comfortably with his attorney as if they were discussing golf instead of destroying someone's life. When he noticed me, he smiled warmly. The same smile that had fooled everyone for years. He even nodded politely. If someone had walked into the room at that moment, they would have thought he was the loving husband, not the man accused of forging signatures and hiding money. Sarah whispered, "Don't look at him." I looked away. The hearing began promptly at 9. The judge entered. Everyone stood, then sat. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the clerk reading the case information. Daniel's attorney spoke first. He walked confidently toward the judge. His presentation was polished, organized, calm. He painted a picture of a devoted husband trying to protect his wife. He described Daniel as a responsible financial advisor who had managed family finances for decades. Then he turned toward me. My client deeply loves his wife. He paused. Unfortunately, Mrs. Harper has experienced increasing memory difficulties over recent years. Every word sounded rehearsed. He presented church statements, neighbor statements, routine medical records, family observations, one by one. Each piece sounded reasonable by itself. Together, They formed a convincing story. The judge listened carefully, never interrupting, never showing emotion. Then it was my turn. Sarah stood. She calmly walked through the financial records, the forged signatures, the hidden accounts, the handwriting expert's report, the internal compliance emails, the suspicious transfers. She was brilliant, clear, precise, logical. For a moment, I felt hope returning. Then Daniel's attorney stood again. Cross-examination. He approached me with a gentle smile. Mrs. Harper? Yes. You've admitted your husband managed the finances. Yes. For decades. Yes. You rarely reviewed statements. That's correct. You signed documents he presented. I did. So you trusted him completely. I did. He nodded. Then how can you be certain you didn't approve these transfers? I looked at Sarah. She gave a slight nod. I never approved accounts I didn't know existed. He smiled politely. But you just testified that you rarely reviewed financial documents. I trusted my husband. So your memory depends largely on trust. I frowned. My memory isn't the issue. He raised an eyebrow. Isn't it? Then he held up my medical records. Mrs. Harper, did your physician ever note forgetfulness? He noted ordinary aging. But the word appears. Out of context. He ignored my answer. Were you ever tired? Yes. Stressed? Yes. Did you ever misplace your keys? Yes. He smiled toward the judge. No further questions. It sounded harmless, but every answer quietly supported his story. Sarah objected several times. The judge sustained some objections, overruled others. The courtroom remained tense. Then Daniel himself took the witness stand. He looked calm, comfortable, almost sympathetic. His attorney asked gentle questions. Mr. Harper? Did you love your wife? Very much. Why did you manage the finances? Because she asked me to. Did you ever intend to deceive her? Never. His voice cracked slightly, convincingly. I only wanted to protect her. Several people in the courtroom looked sympathetic. Even I almost believed him. Then came the question Sarah had warned me about. Mr. Harper, did your wife approve these financial decisions? Yes. Everyone. He never hesitated, never looked uncertain. Every lie came smoothly, as though he had practiced them hundreds of times. Finally, Sarah stood for cross-examination. She immediately introduced the forged signature evidence. Daniel remained calm. I can't explain handwriting differences. She showed him the internal email questioning my signature. I don't remember this. She introduced the hidden account. It was an investment strategy. She asked about the second storage unit. I don't recall. Every answer sounded reasonable. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional. He simply denied everything. Then Sarah asked the question I had been waiting months to hear. Mr. Harper, where is Mark Ellis? For the first time, Daniel paused, only for a second. I don't know. You haven't spoken to him? No. You've had no contact? No. Sarah stared at him for several seconds, then quietly returned to her table. She had no witness to contradict him. Not yet. The judge announced a short recess before closing arguments. As everyone stood, Daniel slowly walked past me. He stopped just long enough to whisper 6 words. The judge will believe me. Exactly the same words he had spoken in the beginning. Only now, I understood why. He wasn't arrogant. He was confident. Because every witness who could expose him had disappeared. Every person who knew the complete truth was missing. As the judge returned to the bench, my heart began sinking. The courtroom grew silent. The judge opened the case file. He adjusted his glasses. He looked ready to continue. I stared at the floor. Maybe this was how it ended. Then the courtroom doors suddenly burst open. Everyone turned. Someone stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, holding a worn brown envelope tightly against his chest. Daniel's face instantly lost its color. The entire courtroom turned toward the open doors. For several seconds, no one spoke. The man standing there looked exhausted. His suit was wrinkled. His hair was uncombed. He breathed heavily as though he had been running. In his hands was a worn, brown envelope. I recognized him immediately. Mark Ellis. Sarah stood so quickly that her chair nearly tipped over. Daniel froze. For the first time since this case began, the calm expression disappeared from his face. His attorney leaned toward him and whispered something. Daniel didn't answer. He simply stared. The bailiff walked toward the doorway. "Sir, court is in session?" "I know. I need to speak." The judge looked over his glasses. "Identify yourself." "My name is Mark Ellis." The room became completely silent. Sarah spoke immediately. "Your Honor, Mr. Ellis is the accountant we previously identified." Daniel's attorney jumped to his feet. "Objection. This witness was not disclosed." Sarah remained calm. "We've been attempting to locate him for weeks." The judge studied Mark carefully. "Mr. Ellis? Why are you here today?" Mark swallowed. "Because I can't live with this anymore." Those words echoed through the courtroom. The judge instructed the bailiff to swear him in. As Mark walked toward the witness stand, he never looked at me. He never looked at Daniel. He kept his eyes on the floor. Only after taking the oath did he finally lift his head. Sarah approached him first. "Mr. Ellis?" "Yes." "How long have you known Daniel Harper?" "About 12 years. Were you involved in managing financial paperwork related to the Harper family?" "Yes." "What was your role?" "I prepared reports. I reviewed transfers. I handled accounting records." Sarah nodded. "Did Mrs. Harper regularly approve large financial transfers?" Mark closed his eyes. Then he quietly answered, "No." The courtroom became silent again. Sarah asked the next question carefully. "Did you ever personally witness Mrs. Harper authorize the transfers now being disputed?" "No." "Then why were they processed?" Mark hesitated. His hands trembled. "I was told—" He paused. "I was told she had already signed everything." "Who told you—" He looked directly at Daniel for the first time. "Daniel Harper." Daniel's attorney stood immediately. "Objection." "Hearsay." Sarah responded calmly. "The witness is describing communications made directly to him during financial transactions." The judge allowed the testimony. Sarah continued. "Did there come a time when you questioned those documents?" "Yes." "What caused your concern?" Mark took a deep breath. "I compared signatures. And they didn't match." A quiet murmur spread through the courtroom. The judge raised a hand. "Order." Sarah placed one of the disputed signatures beside an authentic one. "Are these the documents you reviewed?" "Yes." "What conclusion did you reach?" "I believed several signatures were not genuine." My heart pounded. For months, I had waited for someone besides me to say those words. Now, they were finally spoken under oath. Sarah continued. "What did you do?" "I contacted Daniel." "How?" "Email." "Telephone." I told him we needed verification. What did he say? Mark's voice became even quieter. He told me Linda had become forgetful. He said questioning her would embarrass her. He asked me to trust him. Sarah walked slowly toward the jury box, though this hearing had no jury. She turned back. Did you trust him? At first. When did that change? Mark looked ashamed. When the transfers became larger. How much larger? Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sarah handed him the email Ryan had found. Is this your email? Yes. Did you write it? Yes. What happened after sending it? Mark looked toward the judge. I was told to stay quiet. Sarah didn't interrupt. She let him continue. Daniel came to my office. He wasn't angry. He wasn't loud. He simply explained that no one would believe Linda. The courtroom became absolutely still. He said she already looked confused. He said everyone trusted him. He said if I caused trouble, my career would be over. I saw Sarah glance briefly toward me. She knew this was the moment everything changed. What did you do then? She asked. I stopped processing the transfers. But I didn't report him. Why not? I was afraid. His voice broke. I've regretted that every day. Sarah nodded respectfully. No further questions? Daniel's attorney immediately stood. He walked toward Mark with a confident smile. Mr. Ellis, you disappeared before this hearing. Yes. Why? I was scared. Scared of what? I've already answered. You left town? I tried. But you didn't. No. You expect this court to believe you suddenly developed a conscience? Mark didn't answer. The attorney continued. Isn't it true you're trying to protect yourself from professional consequences? No. You processed the paperwork. Yes. You accepted payment. Yes. So you're equally responsible. Mark lowered his head. Yes. That answer surprised everyone. Daniel's attorney smiled. So you admit your own misconduct. I do. And now you want someone else to blame. Mark slowly looked up. No. I want to tell the truth. His voice was calm now, steady. I've already lived with the lie. I'm done. The courtroom remained silent. Daniel's attorney tried another approach. You have no recordings. No. No written confession. No. No witness who heard these conversations. No. So this comes down to your word. Mark shook his head. No. He lifted the worn brown envelope he had carried into court. It comes down to these. Sarah looked surprised. So do I. The judge leaned forward. What is in the envelope? Mark carefully opened it. Inside were handwritten notebooks, original accounting ledgers, internal reconciliation sheets. Every page carried dates, amounts, account numbers, personal notes. Sarah quickly examined the first notebook. Then she looked at me with tears in her eyes. These were not copies. They were the original working records. Mark explained. I kept them. Why? Because something felt wrong. I couldn't throw them away. Daniel's attorney objected again. But the judge allowed preliminary review. Sarah flipped through the pages, then stopped. She held up one sheet. Written beside a transfer request were 8 handwritten words. Linda never saw these documents. Daniel signed alone. The handwriting belonged to Mark. He confirmed it immediately. The judge carefully read the page, then looked toward Daniel. For the first time all day, Daniel looked nervous, really nervous. His confident smile was gone. His hands gripped the defense table. Sarah quietly whispered to me, "This changes everything." I believed her. But I also noticed something else. Daniel wasn't looking at Mark anymore. He was staring at the brown envelope, as though he knew. There was still something inside that no one else had seen yet. No one moved. The brown envelope rested on the witness stand. Every eye in the courtroom was fixed on it. I had spent months wondering whether anyone would ever expose Daniel. Now I realized the answer had been sitting inside that envelope all along. The judge broke the silence. "Mr. Ellis, you indicated there is additional evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor." "What is it?" Mark carefully removed a thin stack of documents. Unlike the notebooks, these papers had been sealed inside a clear plastic sleeve. "I kept these separate." "Why?" the judge asked. "Because I hoped I would never need them." Sarah stepped closer. "May I?" Mark handed her the sleeve. She slowly opened it. The first document made her stop breathing for a moment. I had learned to read Sarah's face. This was something important. Very important. She looked toward the judge. "Your Honor, I request permission to approach?" The judge nodded. Sarah handed him the first page. He adjusted his glasses and read silently. His expression changed almost immediately. Daniel's attorney stood. "Your Honor." The judge didn't answer. He continued reading. Finally, he looked up. "Mr. Ellis, is this authentic?" "Yes." "How do you know?" "Because I wrote it." Sarah turned toward the courtroom. "It is a memorandum." She paused. "A memorandum documenting a private meeting." My pulse quickened. "What meeting?" the judge asked. Mark swallowed. "The meeting where I refused to process additional transfers." Sarah asked him to explain. "It happened in my office." Daniel came alone. He closed the door. "What did he say?" Mark took a slow breath. "He told me everything would be fine. He said Linda trusted him. He said she never reviewed financial statements." Sarah remained silent. She wanted him to continue in his own words. "He told me," Mark's voice trembled, "that by the time anyone questioned the money, people would already believe Linda was mentally declining." A wave of whispers spread across the courtroom. The judge immediately called for order. Sarah asked another question. "Did you document that conversation?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it frightened me." She held up the memorandum. "This document was written the same afternoon." "Yes." "Was it altered?" "No." Then came the most important question. "Why didn't you report him immediately?" Mark looked directly at me. "I was ashamed. I convinced myself someone else would discover the truth. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility." His shoulders dropped. "I was wrong." His honesty filled the courtroom. He wasn't pretending to be a hero. He admitted his own failure. That made every word more believable. Daniel's attorney quickly approached. "Mr. Ellis." "Yes." "This memorandum was written by you, correct?" "It isn't signed by my client." "No." "It isn't witnessed." "No." "So this is simply your version of events." Before Mark could answer, Sarah stood. "Permission to redirect after cross." The judge nodded. Daniel's attorney smiled confidently. "You kept this paper hidden for years." "Yes." "You never showed police?" "No." "You never showed regulators?" "No." "You never contacted Mrs. Harper?" "No." "So why should this court trust you now?" Mark answered immediately. "Because today, I have nothing left to lose." The attorney frowned. "You expect us to believe that No. I expect you to examine the evidence. The attorney paused, then tried another direction. Weren't you facing disciplinary action? Yes. So blaming Daniel benefits you. Mark slowly shook his head. I already accepted responsibility. I lost my license. The courtroom became quiet again. Even Sarah looked surprised. You lost your accounting license? She asked. Last month. Why? Because I admitted I approved transactions without proper verification. Sarah stared at him. You accepted punishment before coming here? Yes. Why, so no one could say I testified only to save myself. I watched the judge carefully. He wrote several notes. That felt important. Very important. Sarah stood for redirect. Mr. Ellis? Yes? You mentioned there was more inside the envelope. There is. He reached inside once more. This time, he removed a small digital recorder. Old. Scratched. The entire courtroom leaned forward. Sarah looked stunned. What is that? I carried it to meetings. Why? So I could dictate accounting notes afterward. She frowned. Does it contain recordings? Not intentionally. The judge interrupted. Explain. Mark nodded. One afternoon, I forgot to turn it off. The room became completely silent. I placed it in my jacket pocket. And Daniel walked into my office. My heart began pounding again. Sarah asked softly, Did it record the conversation? I didn't realize it until that evening. Did you keep the recording? Yes. Daniel's attorney stood so fast his chair slid backward. Objection. We have no foundation. Sarah calmly replied, We're establishing one now. The judge looked toward Mark. Has the recording been altered? No. Has anyone edited it? No. Has it remained in your possession? Yes. The judge nodded. I will allow preliminary authentication. A technician from the court was called forward. The recorder was connected to courtroom speakers. Every person in the room stopped moving. The technician pressed play. For several seconds, only static. Then voices. Mark's voice first. Quiet, professional. Then another voice. Daniel. There was no mistake. His voice filled the courtroom. I need these processed. Mark answered, I can't. The signatures don't look right. A pause. Then Daniel laughed. A short, calm laugh. Linda hasn't looked at a bank statement in years. Another pause. You worry too much. Mark spoke again. If someone compares signatures... Daniel interrupted. No one will. Another pause. Then came the sentence that changed everything. By the time she realizes what's missing, everyone will think she's losing her memory. The recording ended. No one breathed, no one whispered. The silence felt almost unreal. I slowly turned toward Daniel. His face had become completely white. His attorney leaned toward him frantically. Daniel never looked away from the table. The judge removed his glasses. He stared at Daniel for several long seconds. Then at Sarah. Then at the recorder. Finally, he spoke. Counsel, I believe this matter has become significantly more serious. Sarah nodded quietly. Yes, Your Honor. Daniel's attorney requested another recess. The judge denied it. Then he looked directly at Daniel. For the record, do you deny that this is your voice? Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, then looked toward his attorney. For the first time since this case began, he had no immediate answer. And I realized something. The man who had spent years controlling every conversation had finally run out of words. The silence after the recording felt endless. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the courtroom clock seemed louder than before. Daniel remained seated. His eyes stayed fixed on the defense table. For months he had answered every accusation without hesitation. Now he said nothing. The judge finally broke the silence. "Mr. Harper?" Daniel slowly looked up. "Did you hear the recording that was just played?" "Yes." "Do you deny that it is your voice?" Daniel looked toward his attorney again. His attorney stood. "Your Honor, we request additional time to review the authenticity of this recording." The judge folded his hands. "You've already had the opportunity to cross-examine the witness." "We understand." "Then answer the question." Daniel's attorney hesitated. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I don't deny that it sounds like me." A quiet gasp spread through the courtroom. "But," he continued, "the conversation has been taken out of context." Sarah immediately stood. "What context explains discussing your wife's supposed memory problems before she ever questioned the missing funds?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, his attorney objected. The judge overruled him. Sarah repeated the question. Daniel finally spoke. "I was worried about Linda." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "So worried, that you transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars without telling her. I managed our finances. So that justified hiding accounts?" "I wasn't hiding anything." Sarah calmly picked up one of the bank statements. "This account existed for over 6 years. It never appeared on your joint financial summaries. It never appeared on tax discussions. It never appeared in household records." She looked directly at Daniel. "How was your wife supposed to know it existed?" Daniel remained silent. Sarah walked toward the evidence table. She held up another document. "This is your email instructing employees to proceed without additional verification." She placed it beside the recording transcript. "Then we have your recorded statement saying, 'No one will question the signatures.'" She paused. "And finally, everyone will think she's losing her memory." She looked at the judge. "These pieces don't stand alone. They support each other. They tell one consistent story." The judge slowly nodded. Daniel's attorney tried one final strategy. He called Daniel back to the witness stand. "Mr. Harper, did you ever love your wife?" "Yes." "Do you still?" Daniel looked toward me. "I do. I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Only emptiness." He continued. "I made mistakes. But I never intended to hurt Linda." Sarah immediately objected. "Intent does not erase conduct." The judge agreed. Still, Daniel continued speaking. "I thought I was protecting our future." Sarah approached again. "Protecting it from whom?" Daniel hesitated. "Financial uncertainty." "So you secretly moved retirement funds. I invested them into accounts your wife never knew existed. They were temporary." Sarah picked up another exhibit. The first transfer occurred almost 10 years ago. She looked directly at him. "How long is temporary?" Daniel had no answer. The judge quietly made another note. Then Sarah delivered one final question. "Mr. Harper, did Linda ever authorize you to convince family members she was mentally declining?" "No." "Did she authorize you to gather guardianship paperwork?" "No." "Did she authorize forged signatures?" "No." "So every one of those decisions was yours." Daniel looked exhausted. After several long seconds, he whispered, "Yes." The word barely reached the microphone, but everyone heard it. Emily covered her mouth. Ryan slowly lowered his head. I closed my eyes. Not because I felt victorious, because I had finally heard the truth spoken aloud. The judge called another brief recess before issuing preliminary findings. Outside the courtroom, reporters had already gathered. Word had spread quickly. Sarah advised me not to speak. "We're almost finished." Inside the hallway, Emily approached me. She was crying. "I don't know what to say." I hugged her. "You don't have to say anything." "I'm so sorry. I should have believed you." I gently touched her face. "You believed the man who raised you." "So did I." Ryan walked over quietly. I kept asking myself how Dad could do this. I answered honestly. I've been asking that question for months. Neither of us had an answer. A few minutes later, court resumed. Everyone returned to their seats. The judge reviewed several pages of notes. Then he looked directly at both attorneys. "I have considered the testimony, the documentary evidence, the financial records, the handwriting analysis, the witness statements, and the audio recording." He paused. "The evidence establishes a consistent pattern." Daniel stared straight ahead. The judge continued. "It appears that significant financial transactions occurred without Mrs. Harper's informed consent. It also appears that efforts were made to create the false impression that Mrs. Harper suffered cognitive decline." No one spoke. The judge turned another page. The testimony of Mr. Ellis was particularly persuasive because it was supported by independent documentary evidence. Sarah quietly smiled. For the first time that day, the judge wasn't finished. "I also find the audio recording highly significant. It directly contradicts several statements made during these proceedings." Daniel slowly closed his eyes. His attorney whispered something. Daniel didn't respond. Finally, the judge looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Harper, I strongly suggest that you consult with your attorney regarding any further statements." Daniel nodded weakly. Then something happened that surprised everyone. He stood, without being asked, without permission. He looked toward me. "I'm sorry." The words sounded small, almost empty. After everything that had happened, 2 words could never repair the damage. Sarah immediately objected to the unsworn statement. The judge instructed Daniel to sit down. He did, without another word. The judge concluded the hearing. He announced that a detailed written order would follow after reviewing all submitted evidence. But before ending the session, he made one final observation. "This court exists because trust sometimes fails. When that happens, facts matter." Those words stayed with me. Facts matter. Not rumors, not appearances, not carefully crafted stories. Facts. As people slowly began leaving the courtroom, I remained seated. The room felt different now, lighter. Not because everything was over, because the truth no longer belonged only to me. Sarah quietly gathered our files. She smiled. "You did it." I shook my head. "No." "We did." She looked toward Mark, and so did he. Mark stood alone near the witness stand. He looked relieved, but also broken. He had told the truth, yet he still had to live with the years he stayed silent. Before leaving, he walked toward me. "I don't expect forgiveness. You don't owe me anything." I looked at him carefully. "You came. That's enough." He nodded once, then quietly walked away. I watched him disappear through the same courtroom doors where he had entered only hours earlier. The doors slowly closed behind him. And I realized the hardest part of my life was finally ending. But another chapter was just beginning. The judge's written order arrived 12 days later. Sarah called me early that morning. Her voice was calm, but I could hear relief beneath it. "Linda, the court ruled in your favor." I sat down at the kitchen table. For a moment, I couldn't speak. What exactly does that mean? It means Daniel no longer controls the marital accounts. The court has frozen every disputed asset. He must provide a complete accounting of all transfers, and the judge rejected every claim that you were mentally incompetent. I closed my eyes. Those words mattered more than the money. For months, Daniel had tried to erase my voice. Now the court had restored it in a single sentence. I was competent. I had always been competent. Sarah continued. The judge also referred the financial evidence to the county prosecutor and state regulators. My eyes opened. Criminal charges? Possibly. We'll know soon. I looked around the kitchen. Daniel's coffee mug still sat in the cabinet. His jacket still hung near the garage. Evidence of a marriage that no longer existed. What happens to the house? You can remain there for now. And Daniel, he cannot enter without permission. That afternoon, a deputy accompanied Daniel while he collected his personal belongings. I stayed in the living room. Sarah had advised me not to be alone with him. Emily and Ryan waited in the kitchen. Daniel entered quietly. He looked older than he had in court. His shoulders were bent. His face seemed smaller. For 36 years I had believed he was the strongest person in every room. Now I saw the truth. Control had only made him appear strong. Without it, he looked ordinary. He packed clothes into 2 suitcases, then gathered family photographs from his office. When he reached for our wedding portrait, he stopped. You probably don't want this. I looked at the younger version of myself in the photograph. I was 25. Hopeful, certain. No, I said. You keep it. He placed it carefully in the box. Before leaving, he stood in the doorway. Linda. I waited. I never thought it would end like this. I almost laughed. Neither had I. But I didn't give him the reaction he wanted. Instead, I asked one question. When did you stop seeing me as your wife? He looked confused. I never did. Yes, you did. I kept my voice steady. You watched me trust you. You used that trust to steal from me. You told our children I was losing my mind. You prepared strangers to doubt me. That isn't love. He lowered his eyes. I was afraid. Of what? Retirement. Losing everything. Not having enough. I stared at him. We had enough. I know. Then why? He hesitated, and finally, after months of lies, he gave me an answer that sounded honest. Because once I started moving money, I couldn't admit what I had done. So, you kept going. Yes, and when I discovered it, I panicked. That was all. No grand explanation, no secret tragedy, no hidden sacrifice, just greed, fear, and a lie that became too large to control. He picked up the box. I am sorry I believed he regretted being exposed. I wasn't sure he regretted what he had done. The deputy escorted him outside. Daniel placed the boxes in his car, then drove away. I watched from the window until the car disappeared. Emily came beside me. Are you okay? I thought carefully before answering. No. Then I looked at her. But I will be. Over the next few months, investigators followed the money. They found accounts in 3 states. They found investments under business names. They found a small condominium Daniel had purchased through a private company. I had never seen it, never visited it, never known it existed. More than $600,000 had been moved without my informed consent. Some money was recovered. Some had been lost through risky investments. Some remained hidden. But the financial truth was now documented. Daniel's professional license was suspended. The firm that once praised him quietly removed his photograph from its website. Several former clients came forward with questions about their own accounts. The man who had built his life around reputation watched that reputation collapse. Mark cooperated fully with investigators. He accepted responsibility for his role. He never asked me to defend him. He never asked for public forgiveness. One afternoon, he sent me a handwritten letter. It contained only a few lines. He wrote that silence had seemed easier at first. Then silence became its own kind of lie. He said entering the courtroom was the hardest thing he had ever done. I kept the letter. Not because it erased his failure, because it reminded me that people can still choose truth late. Late is not the same as never. Martha remained beside me through everything. She helped me change the locks. She brought dinner when I forgot to eat. She sat with me while I sorted through 36 years of photographs. Some memories were real. That was the hardest part. Daniel had betrayed me. But not every birthday had been false. Not every family trip had been meaningless. Not every laugh had been an act. I had to learn that a beautiful memory could remain beautiful even when the person inside it later caused pain. Emily visited often. Ryan called almost every day. Neither relationship healed immediately. There were difficult conversations, tears, anger, long silences. They blamed themselves for doubting me. I refused to let guilt destroy what Daniel's lies had already damaged. You were manipulated too, I told them. But we should have known, Ryan said. How? I asked him gently. He spent years making sure you wouldn't. That truth helped all of us. Nearly a year after the hearing, my divorce became final. I sat beside Sarah in a smaller courtroom. There were no reporters, no dramatic witnesses, no brown envelope, only paperwork. The judge signed the decree. 36 years ended with the movement of a pen. Outside, Sarah hugged me. What will you do now? I looked toward the courthouse steps. The morning sun was bright. People hurried past us. Life continued. I don't know. For the first time, those words didn't frighten me. I didn't need Daniel to answer for me. I didn't need him to explain the bank accounts. I didn't need him to tell me where to go. I could decide slowly. I could make mistakes. I could change my mind. I could trust myself again. A few months later, I sold the house. Not because Daniel had wanted to, because I chose to. I bought a smaller home near a public library and a walking trail. On my first night there, I sat alone on the porch. The silence felt unfamiliar. Then it felt peaceful. I thought about Daniel whispering in court. The judge will believe me. He had believed confidence could replace truth. He had believed reputation could erase evidence. He had believed my age made me weak. He was wrong. The judge did not believe the loudest person. He believed the facts. And after years of letting Daniel speak for me, I finally believed myself. Looking back, I learned that betrayal does not always arrive with shouting violence or obvious cruelty. Sometimes it arrives quietly. It hides behind concern. It speaks in a calm voice. It says, "Let me handle it." It says, "You're confused." It says, "Everyone agrees with me." That is why emotional and financial control can be so difficult to recognize. The person hurting you may still smile in public. They may still attend church. They may still look like the perfect spouse, parent, neighbor, or friend. But love should never require you to surrender your voice. Love should never make you afraid to ask questions. Love should never isolate you from your family, your money, your choices, or your own memory. For years, I believed trusting my husband made me loyal. But trust without transparency became a weapon against me. I also learned that being older does not make a woman weak. It does not make her confused. It does not make her invisible. At 61, I had to rebuild my life. I had to learn about accounts I had never managed. I had to enter a courtroom. I had to stand against the man I had trusted for 36 years. I was terrified, but courage does not mean you are never afraid. Courage means you move forward while fear is still beside you. The truth may take time. People may doubt you. Evidence may disappear. Witnesses may stay silent. But every small step matters. Write things down. Keep copies. Ask questions. Speak to someone you trust. Do not ignore the feeling that something is wrong. And remember this: a person who truly loves you will not need to make you smaller in order to feel powerful. My life did not end when my marriage ended. It began again. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but honestly. And sometimes an honest new beginning is worth more than a beautiful lie. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional family stories. Share in the comments, have you ever had to trust yourself when everyone else doubted you, and tell us where you are watching from. Your story may help another woman realize that she is not alone.